Hey, I'm Jeff with WYSICOM. Today we're going to talk about firmware updating the MTP60. This firmware update is a little bit different than some of the ones in the past because we need to do two firmware update files. The first is to take the bootloader version to version 1.2, and the second is to bring the firmware version to version 1.6. So I'm joined with Leslie Lello from our factory in Italy over Skype, and we're going to talk you through some of the bug improvements we've made and other improvements we made to the software and the firmware and why we've done it this way. The first thing that's going to happen, you're going to import your MTP60 to WYSICOM Manager 3.3.0, which is available on the WYSICOM websites. When you import it, you're going to get a device firmware compatibility error. This is totally normal, totally what we're expecting. Just press OK, and you're going to go up here to this firmware update window. When you click it, it's going to open this firmware update window. You're going to press select a file. And if this is your first time, you're going to click import and bring the firmware files into your WYSICOM Manager. You'll see Bootloader 1.2 and Firmware 1.6. Once you do that, you'll see them here appear in your firmware library. If you're updating multiple MTP60s, you'll always want to uncheck Show Only More Recent and start with Bootloader 1.2, then do Firmware 1.6. So, for this MTP, we're going to start with Bootloader 1.2, and it's going to show Update Bootloader V 1.2. Press Start, and as this starts, I'll have Leslie tell us about some of the improvements we've made in this bootloader update.
Hi everyone, thanks Jeff. So we are pretty excited about this new firmware actually, because there are some new things we are including. Let's talk about some minor problem we solved. There was talking about the bootloader. We needed to update the bootloader basically to be able to be, let's say, perfect in the time code, so not having any sort of drift, even when the battery, for example, was switching off or you were having the unit off for a certain amount of time. So that was very important to keep the time code as solid, as stable as possible. Yeah, not only that, we also added some extra things that start from some graphic things. We added like an icon which tells you whether or not the SD card is inside the MTP, and that's pretty useful because of course sometimes it's hidden, you don't want to switch off the unit to be sure it's in or not. So this is one of those tiny things we included. Then moreover we had well, the big one actually is the compatibility with the WYSICOM app, which is going to be in its final, I think, final phase of beta testing. So yeah.
So now that this device program is completed, you'll have seen it go erase and device program completed. The LEDs on your MTP60 should be two green LEDs. This is exactly what you want. You're just going to press the select button, and that's going to take your LEDs to blue. Once you do that, you can close this window, press down arrow, and that'll put it back to Discover. It'll have a red LED. It's totally fine. Hit Start New Discover Device. Now you're going to see it's yellow and in boot mode. From here, you'll click Firmware Update, and we're going to follow a very similar process. You're going to see we're on app version 1.5 and boot version 1.2. So you'll press Select a File, and we'll grab version 1.6 and do the exact same thing.
We have improved massively the recording part. So basically, we improved to the point that if you are recording and your battery just runs out, or you open accidentally the battery door, so the unit switches off without having properly switched off or stopped the recording. The moment you just close back the battery door, or you change the battery in case it was finished, and you start the recording, so you switch on the transmitter, the recording file automatically recaps from the point it was interrupted. So you basically don't lose any sort of data on your audio file. So it's gonna be like a flawless recording. That's very important. And in the case you just take out the SD card, and you have no possibility of recovering or restarting the recording, you might lose only up to 15 seconds to the last point of the recording. So the backup file is pretty much there, except for those tiny amount of seconds. So this is very important for obvious reasons.
Now that your device programming is completed on this firmware, do not unplug the unit yet. You'll see text come on the screen that says, "Do not power off upgrading BT app." This is upgrading some of the Bluetooth application within the unit, and it's important to let this complete, and then the unit will power cycle on its own. Once that power cycles and the unit goes back to the home screen, you're all done. You can close this window and you can start on your next or go back to your next job. For any questions, please send an email to support@wizicom.com.